Fallout, Lost Orleans. No one knows the year. The chronometer just ticks uselessly on the dust-strewn desk as Oscar scavenged the dilapidated building, shafts of pale light filtering through the windows above. Murky as moonshine, he picks it up cautiously for a moment, the hazy green light from its screen gleaming dimly, and gives it a few taps. Despite its faint glow, it wouldn't give the time, the year, the date. That was lost. Locked behind a series of digital 8s that blinked up at him, as though nonplussed. As though, in this crust of a bygone world, it too couldn't fathom the depths of time. The secret mechanics that whirred and clunked within the confines of its rusted shell were long since broken. Still, the scrap parts might fetch something back to the post, he thought. The savvy old stabber pocketed the thing, and then sifted through the other drawers, pulling them out one by one. And one by one they clattered to the floor as they were robbed of any mechanism, any device that might fetch some caps. The post was Oscar's home, the only home a person can have in this land for miles around. It was surrounded by overgrown wastes, tribals, old towns invaded by looming trees, and the snaking river Mississippi. It was an outpost, a way station for traders between the NCR-dominated West and the Commonwealth to the east. Such stations dappled the long road between these sparks of civilization as something like a new Silk Road sprawled between them. There were a few old world cities near the post too. There were cities that once gleamed in neon, warm and inviting, almost like one of those ladies dressed to dazzle in the old world posters. Hot with action, bustle, sass and life. Those old world cities were now unrecognisable. Looming towers of scorched concrete, erect upon scorched earth, eldritch and as forgotten as that chronometer, still with the echoes of a distant past. The same one every eerie city beckoned you to with its posters and dusty record albums. A golden age that was now lost forever in the depths of time. It was all gone because the fire had consumed it. The fire had 888 it. In his pockets, the chronometer blinked that same series of 8s. But, in some ways, that world was still there. It haunted the old world songs that crackled from mended record players. Its pulse beat through from the past in haunting soliloquy. It was still there, in the ruins of the old world, like a ghost. You could always feel it filter through from the past and touch you, like the shadow of a whisper, a murmur. Now Oscar moved, lightly, stealthily from the desk through the hall, his body tracing around the light, keeping to the shadows where he could, so no one who happened to be there might spot him. There are many hard ways to make a living out of the wastes. Shooting a scaver and stealing his loot ain't one of them. He kept an eye out for traps as he moved. He didn't stay alive long as a scavenger without taking extra care while moving through these old buildings. You never knew what you might find. He moved into a corridor and up a flight of stairs before stopping in front of a goddamn door. Yes, it really was a goddamn door. It was steel-plated, barred and bolted, locked sideways, frontways, backways, locked every which goddamn way, and yet Oscar cracked a smile. Excitedly, he pulled out the thermite and set it against the door. No door messed with the post, he chuckled, lightly to himself as he ignited it and rushed to one side, especially when there's bound to be the hole of a sentry on the other side. The flash was over in a few moments, and the door collapsed to the ground with a tremendous clang. The sound reverberated through the building. He drew his gun and waited, straining his ears for any sound, inside or outside the building. There was nothing. The man's smile broadened. Then it slipped from his face. He moved in and was crestfallen to find an ordinary office, almost perfectly preserved, pristine, empty. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. This wasn't normal. He might have expected a vault, some kind of, treasure, but this? He stepped into the room as he holstered his weapon. The man was almost awed by the silence as he stepped around the steel door and paced his way to the desk, like the others he had searched through, and stood there, dumbfounded. He'd wasted thermite for this. He poured his way through the drawers anyway, pocketing a broken watch, hole in a fan, some gears of some broken device, a key, a gold medallion, or at least that was something. And then, upon consideration, a computer cassette labelled VT Guide. The man checked out the rest of the room for any hidden safes, any secret doors, but from the room's dimensions and layout, he knew he was searching in vain. When he found nothing, he sighed, resigning himself for a loss on the day, and set off out of the South's most heavily guarded admin office. Must have been one paranoid boss to have that at his front door, he thought. It didn't concern him too much. What did concern him was his own boss and how he'd start yammering about the damn thermite. Yeah, it sure was a goddamn door. He'd noticed the walls were lead-lined too, and this might have unsettled him if it weren't for the figure that suddenly barred his path. Oster froze. The figure paced forward. Oster reached for his gun. The figure's arm was a blur as 3 belches of smoke streamed forth from the figure's own gleaming barrel. It took a few moments before Oster noticed the white-hot pain, or that he was slumped against the wall, or that he was choking on his own blood. He stared wide-eyed at the figure as it continued to calmly pace towards him, feet not making a sound, as though it walked on the fucking air. Beads of cold sweat glistened on Oster's brow, as his eyes absorbed the details he hadn't caught before. The overcoat, the black tattoo across its face like a crucifix, the lifeless eyes. Mr. Graves looked down at the scaver with those black eyes, before reaching down and rifling through the man's pockets. The scaver sputtered "fuck" as he made his futile strike at the figure. The figure snapped his arm single-handedly, as though it were a twig. Oster yelped as he stared down at his disjointed limb, and the figure silently rose with the cassette labelled VT Guide in one hand and the chronometer in the other. He pocketed the cassette and dropped the chronometer. It clattered to the ground. Mr. Graves then turned and left the building. No man would come after him, and even if they did, if they were so foolhardy, they wouldn't find him. He stepped outside the building, a vast complex with the letters V-U-L-T-T-E-C running along the side, Vultec, before slipping away through the desolate town and disappearing into the looming willows beyond. Oster bled to death as the chronometer slowly wound down, blinking its last series of 8s as its electric pulse died away, and the dying pulse of a bygone world with it. He didn't know why the figure only took the cassette. He didn't truly know what he was dying for. The world faded around the lone scaver, and whatever secrets it may have held vanished with it. So much has changed since the last pulse of those eldritch cities. But war never changes. Act 1, Scene 1. Oswald exhaled from his cigar, the haze of blue-tinted smoke wafting up to the rafters of the cabin he shared with the other man. They sat opposite each other. He was the wealthy proprietor of the Post, trade mogul and entrepreneur, sat in a plush Brahmin-hide seat, leaning back behind his desk and delighting in his cigar in the half-lit room. Early morning southern sunlight peeped through the wooden blinds behind him, casting Oswald in a large and round silhouette, almost like, what's his name, the Hitchcock guy from those old world shows. Lorman, on the other hand, was less comfortable. "Sure you don't want a cigar, Lorman?" Oswald drawled. Lorman, that was a hell of a name he picked up now, wasn't it? He wasn't a Lorman no more, of course. That was a whole world ago. That didn't stop them calling him it, though. You can take the man out of the law and shoot him in the back, but you can't take the law out of the man. Not this man, anyway, so they said. Lorman fidgeted in his chair. His hair was silver grey now, and he looked like he'd seen many gunfights, and not always come out entirely on top. His hands itched for the whiskey he spotted on the sideboard. "Or, you're always welcome to some hooch," Oswald smiled as he watched the man's hands. Damn him, and damn his own thirst. But he didn't refuse as a drink was poured for him, and placed on his side of the desk. Lorman downed it in one gulp. Oswald showed no surprise. "I'll get straight to the point, Lorman. I'm pulling together a team. It ain't the most slick team of gunslingers that ever crossed God's country, but I can make do with a few thieves, former raiders, you know the sort. How are you finding Merc business anyway? It pays the bills well enough, more than what being sheriff ever did," Lorman grunted. "There ain't no law here, just business." Lorman said nothing. "This team," Oswald continued, his chair creaking as he shifted his weight. "I want it to go on the scavenger hunt." "The usual drill?" "Not even. You'll be travelling south, deep south." Oswald peered over the haze of smoke. "How do you feel about that?" Lorman had heard of the south. The post was deep in frontier territory itself, surrounded by tribals only kept at bay by a palisade on one side, the Mississippi on the other, and a sizable tribute. The tribals even then would still raid caravans from time to time, and engage in guerrilla warfare, but hey, that's home sweet home for you. Now that's the post, and it ain't tame by any man's measure, but that's the post. Then there's south. Marshes, swamps, mirelets, gated claws, radioactive fog, and voodoo crazies who make our tribal friends look like fairy godmothers. And here I was just thinking I needed a holiday. Lost cities, Oswald countered, treasure, and above all, technology untouched by the Brotherhood of Steel. The Brotherhood of Steel ain't balmy enough to have gone that far south. Wrong. They have sent a detachment south, recently. What? Why? I don't know, but I'd hazard a guess. Well, guess away then, Lorman gestured, and then said, "Something's happening down there, ain't there? Something has stirred the hornet's nest." It wasn't a question, and that was exactly what the South was, a hornet's nest. The Great War had blasted most of the continent into a barren wasteland, but the further south you went, the more the radiation seemed to have the opposite effect. Perhaps it was the climate, but the mutations were unlike anything else, and the terrain had been changed permanently. The south was almost a dense jungle of warped willows, vines and mires, lakes pooled within dark forests to make passage almost impenetrable. On top of that, the ever-present mist disrupted compasses. It was as though the south had undergone a tectonic shift, might as well have done, because most of the old world cities there had been lost for generations.